Hi, I'm Doyle, and welcome back to my channel. I want to mention a statement that most of us have heard, or an edict, or an order, so to speak, from our bosses, our managers, our leaders, our supervisors over the years. We've probably heard this on at least one occasion, if not more. Work smart. You need to work smarter. So you don't have to work so hard. And we're going to talk about what that means, what is meant by that, or what I believe potentially could be meant by that, but also how that gets received, how that gets interpreted, how you might feel about it. And also I'd like to get your feedback and input as well in the comments after this video. But let's talk for a moment about what the potential interpretations are. The first one that I would like to offer up is, obviously you're not working smart right now, so someone is having to tell you to work smarter, right? I mean, that's just sort of a natural conclusion. Oh, work smarter, so obviously I'm not working smart right now. That's pretty insulting, pretty degrading. And you know, we react according to how we interpret things. And that's one of those occasions and one of those circumstances and situations that at best is a little unpleasant. At worst, it's a pretty big blow, right? It's very demotivating. It's certainly not something that makes you feel good about your day, makes you feel good about your work and the things that you've done. Let's pause that one for a moment and go to the next one. Depending upon how it is said and even how it's framed, the statement can take on subtle but different, and in some cases even significant different meanings. Let's work smarter so we can get more done in the time and the efforts we put in. Now that seems a little more collegial, a little more supportive, a little more constructive. Let us together work smarter, right? And so that's not less personal. It's less of an affront to you and your performance, and more the team needs to work together to work smarter, to get more results, whatever smarter should lead to. That's a logical conclusion. And the third way of interpreting that phrase is we're already working smarter. The circumstances that we're facing right now, whatever they might be, maybe external influences such as the situation that during 2020 that all businesses have faced, and that's the coronavirus pandemic, the quarantine situation, the illnesses, and some of the tragic deaths of citizens, of those victims. We're all facing very trying times. Not the least of which would be market conditions and market circumstances, because there's a big ripple effect that this particular pandemic has. But there are certain threats, even outside of this, that are normally there, that lead an organization or a team or company to do some retrospectives, to look at how they're doing what they're doing. Are there better ways? Are there more efficient ways? Are there more productive ways? And quite frankly, one of the most fundamental ways to answer that question is to go where the work gets done. And that is the frontline professionals or the frontline workers that are actually executing the work. And then to be challenged to say, let us figure out, we're working smart right now, but with these new challenges we've got, or these upcoming challenges, or the goals, objectives that we want to try to accomplish for everyone's greater good, let's find out, let's figure out, let's determine what are better ways that we can do our work, right? And you go, okay, that's a lot more inspiring. That's a lot more complimentary and inclusive, and less accusatory, right? And so those are at least three. There are probably other ways, different ways to interpret, but I think those are three major ways that kind of cover the generalities. I think the natural tendency is to go with the first. Work smart. So obviously I'm not working smart right now. It's a little insulting, and I think that's a very short-sighted way to couch it or say it or to present it to someone if you think that's the need, especially without a context. The second one is a little more inclusive, but it's still has a feeling of manipulation or coercion to it. yes, it's us. Let's us work smarter. But in reality, the message is delivered to me, right, to the individual in that regard. And again, depending on the context, that could be changed, but if it's a one-on-one conversation. But the final one is a lot more enrolling, is a lot more inclusive, is a lot more constructive. And I think that would be the one that would be the most received by someone that was given that statement or told that statement to. That said, so why would you care? Why do you care about working smarter, right? How does that affect your personal, individual results and rewards? But why does it matter? And I want to spend some time talking about that, because I think that's another part of context, that's another part of circumstance that helps how that gets received, and also how you view the challenge, if you will, the challenge or the request to increase productivity. Why do you care about productivity, right? Does it affect how much you get paid? Obviously, that's something that's a very legitimate question or concern. Does it impact that? Does it help the business be more profitable? Does it make the business more sustainable? Does it help grow the business? Does it help make things more secure for the entire business as a whole? Does it make you more promotable? Does it help the customers better? Whatever the case may be, there are a lot of different things that can be considered when you think in terms of why it matters to you, why working smarter matters to you. One I haven't mentioned that I think is probably the most significant, at least the most base or basic thing, and is that you don't have to work so much. Let's think about that. Most professionals work under salary. Now, if you're paid by the hour, your motivation to work more productively is really a challenge, right? Because the more productively I work, probably the less hours I have to work or get paid for. And that's a whole different dynamic that I'm not wanting to go into at this point. Maybe that's a conversation for a later time. But right now, the conversation is most professionals work under a salary. You're expected to work a normal 40-ish hour per week work week and produce out of that time. We do know on occasion that salary people need and have to work a little extra, but sometimes there's the other side of they don't work quite as much, even though they may be present in the office for 40 hours or for the full 8-hour days for the week. They may not necessarily be productive during all those hours, right? There's a lot of downtime, and they need to go run to the cleaners to pick up some things, some at the cleaners or whatever the errand that one might want to or need to run, and not necessarily get docked your pay for those kinds of things. I call that the ebb and flow, the give and take. I'm also a firm believer. My philosophy and my principle on that is, and I've been in management for over 30 years now, has been in the give and take for those employees, those professional employees, and this is one that I've actually embraced myself, for those of us, because I'm an employee, I've always been an employee as well as a supervisor or a manager of people, is that they typically will tend to give more than they take most of the time. And if not, those are the ones that eventually their productivity becomes apparent, and there's a difference between productivity and one person and the next when opportunities present themselves. Projects and promotions, things of that sort, and pay increases and bonuses and things like that are part of the reward system for productive work. So I'm a firm believer that most professionals typically give more than they take. And so they put sort of in their bank, if you will, so that when they need a favor, when they need the take part, then it's there's a good, clear conscience kind of give and take scenario. So why does, from a perspective of a professional salary person, why does being more productive, working smarter, getting more output matter? Partly because most professional people they embrace the goals of the organization, which is to have the organization be successful so that everyone can share in the rewards of that success, whatever that might be. And most people would prefer to have a good balance of the give and take on their time. You spend a lot of time, a lot of hours working professionally for an organization or a company. To be able to minimize those number of hours gives you more time for those other parts of life that you enjoy, that actually maybe in some cases even motivate why you work. That's very helpful and very strongly a part of that mental equation and emotional equation that most people keep in their minds and in their heads and in their hearts about the balance of work and life. And that's a whole other discussion about work-life balance. I do not want to chase that rabbit right here today, but hopefully that gets the point across about why someone might, on that particular perspective. But let's take another perspective on why working smarter might be something that, as an individual, you would be interested in doing. Most people have ambitions of sort. That ambition may be to move up the chain of command, to get promoted into higher levels of positions of higher level responsibility, and hence potentially higher rewards, have greater impact by having a larger, perspective and span of control, if you will, in the typical hierarchical situation. But in any event, be able to increase the degree of impact that you might have in the organization and the mission of whatever that company or organization is. And those people that tend to get those opportunities tend to be the ones that find ways to create more value for the organization. And by creating more value, it's for the cost of the results. The results go up at a greater rate than the costs do. And most people, that's fine because you're chasing those rewards as the results go up. And I'll tell you another one of my philosophies and one of my principles. I learned this and was taught this early in my professional career. One of my first managers in the IT profession, actually, he was the MIS director. It tells you how long ago that is. We're calling him an MIS director. Most people in the IT organization, in the IT industry and profession right now don't even know what an MIS director is. But for those that are listening that may not know, it's a management information systems. That was what the computer departments used to be called back in the 60s and the 70s. He sat down with me one day and we were talking about my compensation and my career and what all. And he said, "You always want to be underpaid." And I told him, "No, I don't want to be underpaid." He said, "Yes, you do." I said, No, you don't understand. I do not want to be underpaid." He said, "No, listen to me." He says, "You want to be underpaid a little bit." He said, "Because the moment that you cost the organization more than the value you bring is the moment you become dispensable." And it took me a minute to process that in my young mind. I was in my 20s at the time and very early in my career in IT. But it stuck with me, and I understood that. And so how I've embraced that and internalized that and then tried to share as part of my leadership principles with those people that I've had the good fortune to have the opportunity to lead and to manage over my career is I tell them, you always want to add more value than you cost the organization, because that puts the organization in an indebted situation to you, but also into a situation where they need you, where it would cost more to get rid of you, to not have you around, because the value that you bring in goes way down. So you always want to have more value, add more value than what you're costing the organization. So working smarter helps you increase that equation in your favor, which puts you in a situation to be able to request, to command, to expect that your rewards are increasing in an appropriate velocity compared to the value that you add, right? And that becomes part of your career management, your career conversations with your leadership and with your superiors in the organization and the hierarchy, people that you report to. And so those are two good primary reasons. But then there's a third one. And this goes to to an individual's fundamental set of values. And this is one that I like to think that I embrace and is part of who I feel I am as a professional, not just as a professional, but just as a human being, as a person. This is a fundamental value. I want to always do the right thing. And the right thing is to give my best. And this goes back to a life lesson I learned a long time ago. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, told me this. He said, "Son," he says, "you always want to give a good day's work for a good day's pay. And that's very simple. That's very fundamental. But I've used that as one of my cornerstones in how I've lived my adult life, and even my young adult life before I even got into the professional world when I was in my teens and working, no matter what it was, whether I was cutting grass, whether I was picking up trash, whether I was hauling hay. Back in the day, some of you may not know what hauling hay is, but you're out in the field and you're picking up bales of hay and throwing it up on a trailer. Back before you had the feeders that fed it up, you had to pick up the bales of hay and throw them up. And hard work. And I didn't work on a farm, but I worked near farms and in circumstances like that. But that stuck with me as well. And that I've used those last two principles I've mentioned as foundational building blocks in my value system and in the principles of how I've lived some of my professional life. But doing the right thing and being fair. Right, and when you go to work for an organization, you enter into an agreement, somewhat of a contract. Right, you're going to do this job, whatever this job entails, and you're going to get compensated in a fair and an appropriate way. And so, as your job changes, it is reasonable to expect that your compensation, that your rewards should change. But even if it doesn't, now that's a different conversation. If it doesn't, but even if it doesn't, I still operate, and I think a lot of people do, operate under to do the best job you can for the organization. Now, if it gets to the point where it's uncomfortable, out of whack for you, and you feel like it's not appropriate anymore, that's a different conversation. Up until that decision when you decide to move on and go somewhere else to peddle your skills elsewhere, so to speak, to use a vernacular, I think there's doing the right thing, working hard, being fair for what your agreement and your arrangement with your employer was from the beginning. So, these are three reasons that I've come up with that make sense to me. Hopefully they make some sense to you. What I would encourage you to do is, if you have a perspective on this, work hard so you don't work smart, so you don't have to work so hard, or work smarter. In that, if you've heard that in the comments, please leave one and ask questions. Tell me your experience. If you disagree with anything that I've said, if you want to add something to what I said, please add that as well. I'd love to hear it, begin a dialogue, because I think these are the kinds of things that in our professional lives and the work environments that we find ourselves that affect and influence, number one, how we feel about what we do, but then also how we feel about the organizations that we are part of. And I think it's really important to be connected in many different ways with what you're doing, who you're doing it with, and who you're doing it for. So until we meet again, I look forward to hearing your comments, reading your comments, and responding. Be safe, enjoy life, and be fair. Bye now.